So when you're developing with Claude Code or Codex, one of the arguments you may have started using is dangerous skip permissions, or Codex has a YOLO mode. And honestly, I use these all the time because without them, it kind of just destroys your developer experience. It prompts you constantly for what tools it can run, what websites it can fetch, and you have to basically babysit it for a very long time until you can get like 100 things added to your accepted tool calls, right? So often to even have like a good developer experience, you kind of have to turn these things on so you can kick off these background tasks and then come back later and check that they did the right thing. Now, the implications of running it with that flag should be pretty obvious, I would hope, but just in case you're not aware of what those implications are, when you let these tools basically run and do whatever they want, they could potentially fetch .env files, they could potentially delete things they shouldn't, they could run commands that they found online, there could be prompt injection issues, and having those run on your actual work laptop or your laptop sounds kind of like a security concern in my opinion. But I asked online to see what most people do, and it seems like 90% of people, at least on X, say that they just run Claude Code directly on their laptop and they don't use any form of a sandbox or isolated environment to potentially reduce the blast radius if these agents go rogue or they install something that they shouldn't. And then add on top of that, it's not even an AI agent type of issue. This is just something when you run an npm install on your computer, there could be a supply chain compromise that has it run some arbitrary script on your computer, and that script can go through and install some type of rootkit, or it can go through and try to find secrets on your computer and send those off somewhere to a remote server. But I'll be honest, I've been running dangerous skip permissions for a very long time on my personal laptop, and so far I haven't had any issues that I know of. My system could be compromised right now. I really wouldn't know. But I do think we're reaching a point now where these AI agents are becoming a lot more capable, and there's a lot more risk involved with just running them directly on your computer or just doing development directly on your computer at this point. So one of the things I'm trying to implement in Mission Control is the ability to spin up remote sandboxes. So I'm going to go ahead and just demo that real quick. But this idea can apply to any of your day-to-day development. Maybe you should be developing inside a Docker container, or you should spin up a remote VM on EC2 or DigitalOcean box and do your development inside of a workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn on this experimental flag. And now at the top of Mission Control, you can actually choose to develop locally, or you can add in a remote VM and use that as your actual sandbox where the agents will run, and you can kind of have the code run externally from your laptop in case there is some type of issue in the future in terms of security. Now, there's a lot of services out there. Daytona is actually one that I have hooked into Mission Control. It's just hidden behind a feature flag until I can like really fine tune that and polish it up. But I wanted to release a bring your own VM type of approach where, let's say you want to host an application on a dedicated server, or for example, I'm using Railway for most of my stuff. I have this Mission Control agent, which I can basically deploy to Railway and have Mission Control, the UI interface, remotely connect using WebSockets to that remote VM. So I'm going to walk you through how that kind of works and just kind of talk about the architecture a little bit. So let's go to Railway. I'm going to make a new repo here. I'm going to paste in my repo, and then we're going to say deploy repo. And then for variables, we do want to specify two variables. To make this secure, you do want to have some type of API token. So you can't really deploy this agent running on some remote VM without an API token set up. So I'm going to add those in, and then we're also going to go and give it a domain so we can actually like access this from our machine. So I'm going to deploy those. Now I will say the agent is something I just recently worked on. So there are a lot of things I need to reconsider about like how to make this a better developer experience for hosting this on a VM. Right now, it seems like the first script requires Docker, but I think you can just clone this repo and run it directly on the machine itself if you want, so that then Mission Control then can connect to it. Now, the last thing I'll do here is inside the config as code, I'm going to paste in this deploy JSON script, and that is going to allow Railway to know how to set up and run the right Docker container that's in this project. And the last thing we need to do is add in a volume. Now, this is only for Railway. If you're hosting on your own VM, you probably don't need to do this. But I'm going to go ahead and just mount it to home/workspace so that when I configure Claude Code or Codex or Cursor inside of the agent itself, it can persist those values even between restarts of the VM, so that I don't have to keep on re-authenticating every single time I want to use this VM. All right, so at this point, the agent is done running. I should be able to go to my settings and just make sure that this domain is copied to my clipboard. And then I should be able to go back to Mission Control. And if I go to New Sandbox, we have the option to choose either a local Docker instance, which will then containerize and run all the agents inside of that same agent repo I talked about. Or we can do a remote VM. I'll just say Railway testing. And then we're going to paste in that domain that we already generated for that Railway app. And then we can paste in our API key here, which I just pasted in. We click create. And now we're going to verify, can we actually connect to this? We are connected to the remote agent. And if we were to go over to importing a project, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on my WebDev Cody project and import that. Now notice when I first try to run a Claude Code session, it's going to say that there's no Git repo here, and that's because I haven't set up an SSH key inside of the agent to even know how to like download my code. So that's also another option. If you go and configure that sandbox or go to the Git config, I'm just going to upload directly from my local machine. I'm going to push over my SSH keys, which will grant that sandbox access to clone my private Git repos. But obviously, if you want more security, you should probably generate an SSH key on the sandbox itself and then go into your GitHub settings and give it access just to the repos that you want. So at this point, I could just go ahead and try to clone again. And so now if I were to do like an ls, you'll see that it does print out the files. And if I do a git remote, you'll see that it is connecting to the remote origin here. And now we can actually configure Claude Code to have access to run on the sandbox. I'm going to go ahead and just sign in real quick. And now we can run whatever normal prompt that we would in Claude Code or Codex, but now that's going to run inside the sandbox itself instead of locally on our machine. And we can do all the other same commands like normal. The only difference is that Mission Control uses that API key to send over events to that WebSocket connection. And you cannot get that initial WebSocket connection unless you have the proper key. Okay, that's done running. I can go and look at my changes. I should have a header somewhere. Let's click on the header and you'll see that that got added in here. And I could potentially add this in, and then I could just go ahead and ship that directly to my branch from the sandbox itself, and then that'll get deployed out in my CI/CD pipeline. Now, one of the reasons I mentioned this is actually useful is because of security, but also it's just a better developer experience. Let's say you want to kick off a long-running agent, but you don't want to be sitting in front of your computer to do it, right? You can actually close your laptop and have that just run in the cloud and then come back in 30 minutes or an hour when it's done doing its work. So having these agents run in the cloud can help you spin off more agents concurrently. Now, in this particular example, I'm doing one VM for all your projects. But if you want to get more granular, we could actually hook this into like an automated EC2 system to spin up a new VM when you want to actually kick off a work tree and have that run in the cloud, or maybe you want to have every project be its own isolated VM. Yeah, I guess leave a comment below if you even think this is something useful to add into Mission Control. Like, is this something you ever even thought about, like deploying and doing your code on a workspace? I know GitHub already has built-in workspaces. There's something like Gitpod that also allows you to spin up like a remote VS Code instance. So there is a need for this, and I think the need is more from like the professional enterprise engineering side of it, not necessarily the indie hacker side project side of things. But I guess let me know. You can find this on version 0.40 of Mission Control. We're already at almost 600 total downloads. Now, honestly, I don't know how many people use this application because I don't have telemetry set up on this. I'm pretty happy that we have at least 600 people downloading Mission Control, playing around with it. And be sure to join the Discord channel if you want to talk to me or give me some feedback. There is a Discord community with all the people who are actively talking and giving me insight into how to make Mission Control better. So feel free to join that free community and give me some feedback. Other than that, let me know what your thoughts are on this approach. Have a good day. Happy coding.